Alexios I Komnenos, Latinized as Alexios I Komnenos, was Byzantine emperor from 1081 to 1118. Although he was not the founder of the Komnenian dynasty, it was during his reign that the Komnenos family came to full power, inheriting a collapsing empire and faced with constant warfare during his reign against both the Seljuk Turks in Asia Minor and the Normans in the Western Balkans. Alexios was able to halt the Byzantine decline and begin the military, financial, and territorial recovery known as the Komnenian Restoration. The basis for this recovery were various reforms initiated by Alexios. His appeals to Western Europe for help against the Turks were also the catalyst that likely contributed to the convoking of the Crusades. Life. Alexios was the son of the domestic of the schools John Komnenos and Anna Dalasina, and the nephew of Isaac I Komnenos. Alexios' father declined the throne on the abdication of Isaac, who was thus succeeded by 4 emperors of other families between 1059 and 1081. Under one of these emperors, Romanos IV Diogenes, Alexios served with distinction against the Seljuk Turks. Under Michael VII Ducas Parapinax and Nicephorus III Botaniates, he was also employed, along with his elder brother Isaac, against rebels in Asia Minor, Thrace, and in Epirus. In 1074, Western merchantmen led by Rus elder Balul rebelled in Asia Minor, but Alexios successfully subdued them by 1076. In 1078, he was appointed commander of the field army in the west by Nicephorus III. In this capacity, Alexios defeated the rebellions of Nicephorus Bryennios the Elder and Nicephorus Basilax, the first of the Battle of Calavrai and the latter in a surprise night attack on his camp. Alexios was ordered to march against his brother-in-law Nicephorus Melissenus in Asia Minor but refused to fight his kinsman. This did not, however, lead to a demotion, as Alexios was needed to counter the expected invasion of the Normans of southern Italy, led by Robert Guiscard. Conspiracy and revolt of the Komnenoi against Botaniates while Byzantine troops were assembling for the expedition. The Ducas faction at court approached Alexios and convinced him to join a conspiracy against Nicephorus III. The mother of Alexios, Anna Dalasina, was to play a prominent role in this coup d'état of 1081, along with the current empress, Maria of Alania, first married to Michael VII Ducas and secondly to Nicephorus III Botaniates. She was preoccupied with the future of her son by Michael VII. Constantine Ducas. Nicephorus III intended to leave the throne to one of his close relatives, and this resulted in Maria's ambivalence and alliance with the Komnenoi, though the real driving force behind this political alliance was Anna de Larsen. The empress was already closely connected to the Komnenoi through Maria's cousin Irene to Isaac Komnenos, so the Komnenoi brothers were able to see her under the pretense of a friendly family visit. Furthermore, to aid the conspiracy, Maria had adopted Alexios as her son, though she was only 5 years older than he. Maria was persuaded to do so on the advice of her own alans and her eunuchs, who had been instigated by Isaac Komnenos. Given Anna's tight hold on her family, Alexios must have been adopted with her implicit approval. As a result, Alexios and Constantine, Maria's son, were now adoptive brothers, and both Isaac and Alexios took an oath that they would safeguard his rights as emperor. By secretly giving inside information to the Komnenoi, Maria was an invaluable ally. As stated in the Alexiad, Isaac and Alexios left Constantinople in mid-February 1081 to raise an army against Botaniates. However, when the time came, Anna quickly and surreptitiously mobilized the remainder of the family and took refuge in the Hagia Sophia. From there she negotiated with the emperor for the safety of family members left in the capital, while protesting her son's innocence of hostile actions. Under the falsehood of making a vesperal visit to worship at the church, she deliberately excluded the grandson of Botaniates and his loyal tutor, met with Alexios and Isaac, and fled for the forum of Constantine. The tutor discovered they were missing and eventually found them on the palace grounds, but Anna was able to convince him that they would return to the palace shortly. Then, to gain entrance to both the outer and inner sanctuary of the church, the women pretended to the gatekeepers that they were pilgrims from Cappadocia who had spent all their funds and wanted to worship before starting their return trip. However, before they were to gain entry into the sanctuary, Strabo Romanos and royal guards caught up with them to summon him back to the palace. Anna then protested that the family was in fear for their lives. Her sons were loyal subjects, and had learned of a plot by enemies of the Komnenoi to have them both blinded, and had, therefore, fled the capital so they may continue to be of loyal service to the emperor. She refused to go with them and demanded that they allow her to pray to the Mother of God for protection. This request was granted, and Anna then manifested her true theatrical and manipulative capabilities. She was allowed to enter, as if she were weighed down with old age and worn out by grief. She walked slowly, and when she approached the actual entrance to the sanctuary made 2 genuflections. On the third she sank to the floor and, taking firm hold of the sacred doors, cried in a loud voice, "Unless my hands are cut off, I will not leave this holy place except on one condition, that I receive the emperor's cross as guarantee of safety." Nicephorus III Botaniates was forced into a public vow that he would grant protection to the family. Strabo Romanos tried to give Anna his cross, but for her it was not sufficiently large enough for all bystanders to witness the oath. She also demanded that the cross be personally sent by Botaniates as a vow of his good faith. He obliged, sending a complete assurance for the family with his own cross. At the emperor's further insistence, and for their own protection, they took refuge at the convent of Petrion, where they were eventually joined by Maria of Bulgaria, mother of Irene Doukaina. Botaniates allowed them to be treated as refugees rather than as guests. They were allowed to have family members bring in their own food and were on good terms with the guards from whom they learned the latest news. Anna was highly successful in 3 important aspects of the revolt. She bought time for her sons to steal imperial horses from the stables and escape the city. She distracted the emperor, giving her sons time to gather and arm their troops, and she gave a false sense of security to Botaniates that there was no real treasonous coup against him. After bribing the western troops guarding the city, Isaac and Alexios Komnenos entered the capital victoriously on April 1, 1081. During this time, Alexios was rumored to be the lover of Empress Maria of Alania, the daughter of King Bagrat IV of Georgia, who had been successively married to Michael VII Ducas and his successor Nicephorus III Botaniates, and who was renowned for her beauty. Alexios arranged for Maria to stay on the palace grounds, and it was thought that he was considering marrying her. However, his mother consolidated the Ducas family connection by arranging the emperor's marriage to Irene Doukaina, granddaughter of the Caesar John Ducas, the uncle of Michael VII, who would not have supported Alexios otherwise. As a measure intended to keep the support of the Doukai, Alexios restored Constantine Ducas, the young son of Michael VII and Maria, as co-emperor, and a little later betrothed him to his own firstborn daughter Anna, who moved into the Mungana palace with her fiancé and his mother. This situation changed drastically, however, when Alexia's first son John II Komnenos was born in 1087. Anna's engagement to Constantine was dissolved, and she was moved to the main palace to live with her mother and grandmother. Alexios became estranged from Maria, who was stripped of her imperial title and retired to a monastery, and Constantine Ducas was deprived of his status as co-emperor. Nevertheless, he remained in good relations with the imperial family and succumbed to his weak constitution soon afterwards. wars against the Normans, Pechenegs, and Zarchis. The nearly 37-year reign of Alexios was full of struggle. At the outset he faced the formidable attack of the Normans, led by Robert Guiscard and his son Bohemond, who took Dyrrhachium and Corfu and laid siege to Larissa in Thessaly. Alexios suffered several defeats before he was able to strike back with success. He enhanced his resistance by bribing the German king Henry IV with 360,000 gold pieces to attack the Normans in Italy, which forced the Normans to concentrate on their defences at home in 1083–84. He also secured the alliance of Henry, Count of Monte Sant'Angelo, who controlled the Gargano Peninsula and dated his charters by Alexia's reign. Henry's allegiance would be the last example of Byzantine political control on peninsular Italy. The Norman danger subsided with the death of Guiscard in 1085, and the Byzantines recovered most of their losses. Alexios next had to deal with disturbances in Thrace, where the heretical sects of the Bogomils and the Paulicians revolted and made common cause with the Pechenegs from beyond the Danube. Paulician soldiers in imperial service likewise deserted during Alexia's battles with the Normans. As soon as the Norman threat had passed, Alexios set out to punish the rebels and deserters, confiscating their lands. This led to a further revolt near Philippopolis, and the commander of the field army in the west, Gregory Parkurianos, was defeated and killed in the ensuing battle. In 1087 the Pechenegs raided into Thrace, and Alexios crossed into Moesia to retaliate but failed to take Dorostolin. During his retreat, the emperor was surrounded and worn down by the Pechenegs, who forced him to sign a truce and to pay protection money. In 1090 the Pechenegs invaded Thrace again, while Zarchis, the brother-in-law of the Sultan of Rum, launched a fleet and attempted to arrange a joint siege of Constantinople with the Pechenegs. Alexios overcame this crisis by entering into an alliance with the horde of 40,000 Cumans, with whose help he crushed the Pechenegs at Livonian in Thrace on 29 April 1091. This put an end to the Pecheneg threat, but in 1094 the Cumans began to raid the imperial territories in the Balkans, led by a pretender claiming to be Constantine Diogenes, a long-dead son of the Emperor Romanos IV. The Cumans crossed the mountains and raided into eastern Thrace until their leader was eliminated at Adrianople. With the Balkans more or less pacified, Alexios could now turn his attention to Asia Minor, which had been almost completely overrun by the Seljuk Turks. Byzantine-Seljuk Wars and the First Crusade. By the time Alexios ascended the throne, the Seljuks had taken most of Asia Minor. Alexios was able to secure much of the coastal regions by sending peasant soldiers to raid the Seljuk camps. But these victories were unable to stop the Turks altogether. As early as 1090, Alexios had taken reconciliatory measures towards the papacy, with the intention of seeking Western support against the Seljuks. In 1095 his ambassadors appeared before Pope Urban II at the Council of Piacenza. The help he sought from the West was simply some mercenary forces, not the immense host that arrived, to his consternation and embarrassment. After the Pope preached the First Crusade at the Council of Clermont later that same year, not quite ready to supply this number of people as they traversed his territories, the emperor saw his Balkan possessions subjected to further pillage at the hands of his own allies. Alexios dealt with the first disorganized group of crusaders, led by the preacher Peter the Hermit, by sending them on to Asia Minor, where they were massacred by the Turks in 1096. The second and much more formidable host of crusaders gradually made its way to Constantinople, led in sections by Godfrey of Bouillon. Bohemond of Taranto, Raymond IV of Toulouse, and other important members of the Western nobility. Alexios used the opportunity to meet the Crusader leaders separately as they arrived, extracting from them oaths of homage and the promise to turn over conquered lands to the Byzantine Empire. Transferring each contingent into Asia, Alexios promised to supply them with provisions in return for their oaths of homage. The crusade was a notable success for Byzantium, as Alexios recovered a number of important cities and islands. The siege of Nicaea by the Crusaders forced the city to surrender to the emperor in 1097, and the subsequent Crusader victory at Dorilaeon allowed the Byzantine forces to recover much of Western Asia Minor. John Ducas re-established Byzantine rule in Chios, Rhodes, Smyrna, Ephesus, Sardis, and Philadelphia in 1097 to 1099. This success is ascribed by Alexia's daughter Anna to his policy and diplomacy, but by the Latin historians of the Crusade to his treachery and deception. In 1099, a Byzantine fleet of 10 ships was sent to assist the Crusaders in capturing Laodicea and other coastal towns as far as Tripoli. The Crusaders believed their oaths were made invalid when the Byzantine contingent under Tatikios failed to help them during the siege of Antioch. Bohemond, who had set himself up as Prince of Antioch, briefly went to war with Alexios in the Balkans, but he was blockaded by the Byzantine forces and agreed to become a vassal of Alexios by the Treaty of Devil in 1108. In 1116, though already terminally ill, Alexios conducted a series of defensive operations in Bithynia and Mysia to defend his Anatolian territories against the inroads of Malik Shah, the Seljuk Sultan of Iconium. In 1117 he moved on to the offensive and pushed his army deep into the Turkish-dominated Anatolian plateau, where he defeated the Seljuk Sultan at the Battle of Philomelion. Personal life. During the last 20 years of his life, Alexios lost much of his popularity. The years were marked by persecution of the followers of the Paulician and Bogomil heresies. One of his last acts was to publicly burn at the stake Basil, a Bogomil leader, with whom he had engaged in a theological dispute. In spite of the success of the crusade, Alexios also had to repel numerous attempts on his territory by the Seljuks in 1110 to 1117. Alexios was for many years under the strong influence of an eminent Grise, his mother Anna de Larsen, a wise and immensely able politician whom, in a uniquely irregular fashion, he had crowned as Augusta instead of the rightful claimant to the title, his wife Irene Doukaina. Dalasina was the effective administrator of the empire during Alexia's long absences in military campaigns. She was constantly at odds with her daughter-in-law and had assumed total responsibility for the upbringing and education of her granddaughter Anna Komnena. Succession. Alexia's last years were also troubled by anxieties over the succession. Although he had crowned his son John II Komnenos co-emperor at the age of 5 in 1092, his wife, Irene Doukaina, wished to alter the succession in favor of their daughter Anna and Anna's husband, Nicephorus Bryennios the younger. Bryennios had been made Kaiser and received the newly created title of Panhypersebastis, and remained loyal to both Alexios and John. Nevertheless, the intrigues of Irene and Anna disturbed even Alexia's dying hours. Pretenders and rebels. Apart from all of his external enemies, a host of rebels also sought to overthrow Alexios from the imperial throne, thereby posing another major threat to his reign. Due to the troubled times the empire was enduring, he had by far the greatest number of rebellions against him of all the Byzantine emperors. These included pre-First Crusade Reactor, a Byzantine monk who claimed to be the Emperor Michael VII. He presented himself to Robert Guiscard, who used him as a pretext to launch his invasion of the Byzantine Empire. A conspiracy in 1084 involving several senators and officers of the army. This was uncovered before too many followers were enlisted. In order to conceal the importance of the conspiracy, Alexios merely banished the wealthiest plotters and confiscated their estates. Zarchus, a Seljuk Turkic emir who assumed the title of emperor in 1092. Constantine Humbertopoulos, who had assisted Alexios in gaining the throne in 1081, conspired against him in 1091 with an Armenian called Aribus. John Komnenos, Alexios' nephew, governor of Dyrrhachium, accused of a conspiracy by Theophylact of Bulgaria. Theodore Gabras, the quasi-independent governor of Trebizond, and his son Gregory. Michael Taranites, the brother-in-law of Alexios. Nikephoros Diogenes, the son of Emperor Romanos IV. Pseudo-Diogenes, an impostor who assumed the identity of another of Romanos' sons, Leo Diogenes. Charax, the leader of a revolt in Crete. Rapsamates, who tried to create an independent kingdom in Cyprus. Post-First Crusade Salomon, a senator of great wealth who in 1106 engaged in a plot with four brothers of the Anemas family. Gregory Taranites, another governor of Trebizond, the illegitimate descendant of a Bulgarian prince named Aaron, formed a plot in 1107 to murder Alexios as he was encamped near Thessalonica. The presence of the Empress Irene and her attendants, however, made the execution of the plot difficult. In an attempt to have her return to Constantinople, the conspirators produced pamphlets that mocked and slandered the Empress, and left them in her tent. A search for the author of the publications uncovered the whole plot, yet Aaron was only banished due to his connection of the royal line of Bulgaria, whose blood also flowed in the veins of the Empress Irene. Reform of the monetary system in 1092. Under Alexios I Komnenos, the debased solidus was discontinued and a gold coinage of higher fineness was established in 1092. Commonly called the hyperpyron at 4.45 grs. The hyperpyron was slightly smaller than the solidus. It was introduced along with the electrum aspirin tracker, worth a third of a hyperpyron and about 25% gold and 75% silver. The bilin aspirin tracker or stamen, and valued at 48 to the hyperpyron and with 7% silver wash, and the copper tetarteron and numion, worth 18 and 36 to the bilin aspirin tracker. Alexios, a reform of the Byzantine monetary system in 1092, was an important basis for the financial recovery and therefore supported the so-called Komnenian restoration. As the new coinage restored financial confidence,